Okay, so good morning, everyone. My name is Astrid Spink, and I am the Sectors and Communities Manager for the public and health sectors for ACCA in the UK. It's my job to work with members within those sectors to bring them together to form communities and to provide them with support and engagement opportunities, a bit like this morning's Talking Health Sector discussion. So this is part of our Talking Health Sector series, and this morning we're going to be focusing on life sciences and biotech. I'm assisted in my community building endeavours by our Health Sector Network Community Panel, two members of which are with me on the call, Maddie and Sinead. Our speakers today are George Caterer, who's a Membership and Business Development Manager at the Bioindustry Association, Melissa Strange, who is CFO at Brainomics, Sinead McCormack, who is CFO at Medicines Discovery Catapult, and Maddie Kennedy from CFO for Growth. Before we start the discussion, a few housekeeping rules. Please do come on camera if you can. It's always great to see people. If you are not talking, please do put yourself on mute, just so we can minimize any background noise. Also, we'd love to be able to continue the discussion after this meeting. So please do post your LinkedIn profile or your email address into the chat. We'd love to hear from you after the discussion. And this part of the session will be recorded for those who are unable to attend. However, we will stop the recording once we move to the discussion part of this morning's event. So I'll hand over now to George, who's going to give us an overview of the work of the Bioindustry Association.
Yep, brilliant. Thank you, Astrid. I'm just going to look to share my screen. I've got a couple of slides, nothing too severe for this time on a Friday morning, hopefully. Can everyone see that? Yeah, see Astrid nodding, so at least one person can see it. Okay, so I think my role here is to give a bit of overview on the BIA, Bioindustry Association, for people that aren't aware of us, and how we work in the healthcare life science sector, before Melissa goes into a bit more detail on our sort of finance and tax work, sitting on the vice chair of our committee there. So BIA, this is a fancy marketing way of saying we're essentially trade association for all of life sciences across the country, with the aim to improve the business landscape for companies operating within that space. We run as a membership organisation. Companies join us to support our work, to engage with our community and network, and to contribute to our work. At the moment, this is a tiny bit out of date, even now that we're getting closer to 600 companies these days. So that's 570 odd organizations. It's a organizational membership. Companies join and then employees access the membership. We engage from 2-person, fresh out of university spin-outs, all the way up to AstraZeneca and everything in between. But about 60% of our membership is made up of SME biotechs, so sort of rapidly growing innovative biotechs is our core demographic. And then the rest of membership is made up of what we call associates. So it's where you guys might fit in and the sort of companies that you are working with. It could be people in the finance space, investors, consultants, accountants, recruiters, anyone our companies might want to go to for support. And then also the not-for-profit side of the sector, so academic institutions, medical research charities, NHS trusts, anyone that might want to collaborate with industry for a partner with at some point in the journey. This slide, very quick overview of just some of the companies that we represent and engage with, and some of the communities within the BIA. So obviously, life sciences and healthcare is a very broad umbrella, and within that we have so many subgroups, people working in genomics, people working in synthetic or engineering biology, people working on advanced therapies, manufacturing, and then perhaps more recently this sort of tech bio digital space as well. So anyone doing anything from AI and drug discovery to digital health platforms, and it's bringing in a whole new cohort of people with tech and digital skills as opposed to more traditional wet lab skills that we've operated in since, well, as an organization since the 80s. This very briefly is showing kind of how the BIA sees its future and some of those subsectors that we can really help going forwards. So we, as I say, we already have really strong areas within cell and gene therapy, within the regulatory IP space. On the left, these are areas that we feel that we can support more going forwards, and we're looking to engage more and more with companies within those spaces, especially within that tech community that I mentioned, and then also within the engineering biology space. And that's not just healthcare-based engineering biology, but that's life science as a platform. We're now engaging with companies that are doing cultured meat, innovative materials, engineering bacteria for recycling, all sorts of planet health is one term that people are using beyond just healthcare. So I know it was spoken at the healthcare webinar, but we do more than just that within the sort of life science umbrella. This, just to say, our organisation is member-led, even to the point where our board is made up of members. So everything we do, every policy discussion, every event, every sort of action we take is really led by those companies in the sector. And we try to strive to a representation across the pharma, the biotech, the finance side, and really get a snapshot of the sector that's leading us, which currently Dan Mahoney being our chair of our board and sort of leading the charge on all of our work. What we actually do splits into these three categories really roughly. So we influence policy as a trade body, responsible for engaging across government. We connect the sector, providing networking opportunities, letting everyone meet and collaborate. And then we save our members money via a sort of procurement program that we have for our companies. On the influencing side, we engage across the board with external stakeholders that affect the sector. It could be UK government, the MHRA. We sit on various boards like the MMIP and all these exciting acronyms internationally. And the idea is to give our members and the companies that engage with us a voice, a seat at the table that perhaps they wouldn't have, on their own or within their own company, and they can join that community at work. The way that's led, the way that's actually carried out is via these groups, advisory committees, which Melissa is going to talk to shortly about our Finance and Tax Committee, as Mrs. Vice Chair at the moment. We have other groups focusing on all subsectors across the sector, and then we've also developed working groups and committees within newer spaces that we're focusing on, like diversity and inclusion within the sector, skills piece, and things like the LEAP program, for example, is a sort of entrepreneurial program for up-and-coming managers within the space as well. So more than just the traditional policy work that we've done in the past, we're sort of really looking to broaden that out. A lot of our work, a lot of our output culminates in these types of publications that we share with the sector. These are just a few of our sort of more recent ones. On the left, looking at social implications of rare disease medication and treatment. As I mentioned, a piece on sort of diversity and inclusion that we've been doing in the sector, and we've been doing a sort of benchmarking of data project across membership to see where we lie internationally as a sector, and then also compared to other sectors. And we've been doing a lot of output and workshops and things around that. And then the last piece, looking at VPAS for the future, which is something that I'm not going to dive into. I think you could do a whole webinar on VPAS, which I wouldn't be leading in any way, shape, or form. A couple of examples, real world examples of how a trade association operates and can benefit the sector. I'm not going to dive into them deeply because in case Melissa's covering them. Silicon Valley Bank collapse that happened a couple of months ago now, a few months ago, as everyone will be aware, would have been a catastrophe for our sector. I think about 40% of biotechs potentially wouldn't have had a bank on Monday morning. The BIA, among other organisations, obviously campaigned really heavily for the HSBC to acquire the bank during that collapse, and were successful. An example of how a strong and respected trade body can, act in times of disaster, you could say. On the right, to do with R&D tax credit reform. So obviously with the changes that happened to the R&D tax credits last year, a negative impact that would have had on the sector. Another really strong piece of work for our finance group, led by Steve and Martin Turner as well, our head of finance, to have those changes reversed and help support the sector once again. And then I couldn't not include a slide on the COVID-19 vaccine task force. So whenever I talk about BIA's capabilities, there's not much of a better example, but the BIA's manufacturing group started the scale-up task force for the manufacturing of the vaccine back during the pandemic. And this is just a few snippets from Kate Bingham's book, because there's not much that I could say that Kate wouldn't say better. And I particularly like the bottom one, talking about where we'd be without the BIA. And it just shows again that that impartial network, that sort of middleman that connects the sector, can really help pull people together when it's needed. Moving on briefly to the sort of connecting piece within those three, the most important part of what we provide there would be an opportunity for everyone to meet. So our events, our networking opportunities, our conferences really are a brilliant way to engage with the sector, meet partners, startups, meeting investors, meeting your next role as well. We have that sort of internal network. Just last night, we had our summer party at the Langham Hotel in London. So if I'm a bit hoarse, that's because there's travelling back at midnight from that. That's a really good event, sort of pure networking mix, about 300 people we had there. Coming up next, we've got a reception or a networking reception in Stevenage, so looking at the advanced therapies work they're doing there. And then later in the year, we have our sort of conference season. So Tech Bio focusing on data-driven innovations, and Bioprocess UK focusing more on manufacturing, processing, fermentation and the like in the sector. And then Women in Biotech, next one in Oxford. It travels all over the UK. Another great networking reception focused on diversity in the sector, but absolutely open to everyone as well. So people sometimes don't sign up because they don't think they're the target audience. Please do, everyone come. It's a really good networking event. One other thing we do for members as a sort of member offering is this work on helping them build profile, so connecting more digitally with the sector. So members basically get access to all of our platforms to share their story. It could be as simple as press releases across our website. It could be more detailed, like blogs and spotlight interviews in our marketing emails. We help push things out on social media. All of this support is for every member, and it really helps startups in particular, because obviously they don't normally have the marketing or the comms person as the first hire. It's usually the CEO sort of furiously tweeting on their lunch break at a conference or something. We can be a bit of pressure relief on that. We can be a bit of a platform where they can put all of their content, and we can help share that with the community and really celebrate A, what the UK sector are doing, and B, what all of our individual members are achieving. And then lastly, that's this third bit of the three main areas we work. I mentioned the procurement program. Basically, we have various partners that we offer our members discounts to. For most of our members, being a life science trade association, lab supplies, consumables is a really big one, obviously. So we have a partnership with EWR where members get about 50% off of lab prices, reagents, and the like. But we have a few other providers on there aimed at hopefully giving all members access to something that can support them and letting them spend more on money, on people is the idea, than on equipment. But that is somewhat of a whistle-stop tour of how we work, but hopefully it gives you enough context for Melissa to do a deep dive into the sort of finance work that we're doing.
Super. Astrid, did you want me to go, or did you want to say anything in between?
Yeah, no, just other than say
super.
thank you, George, and yeah, over to Melissa to learn more about your work within the committees within BIA.
Super. So thank you very much, George. That was a great overview, and I can see a couple of friendly faces on this call who will probably correct me when I go off-piste with what the committee's been up to. So I've been on the Finance and Tax Advisory Committee for about 6 to 7 years, and I've been Vice Chair for the last 3 years of that. And overall, I've been working within life sciences for 15 years. And for me, one of the reasons I work in this space is, as a finance person, we can pretty much work anywhere, is the ability to have an impact on patients. And that's one of the things that drives me. And I initially joined the committee to build out my network with other people within the industry, to hopefully get exposed to some of the work the committee and the BIA does, and hopefully get involved with it actively as well. And I can definitely confirm that has been happening, particularly in the recent years. In terms of the committee, we've got about 20 to 30 active members, and we come from a variety of backgrounds, including a mix of advisors, so legal advisors, your tax advisors, some investor representatives, and this is an area we're looking to grow because it's great to get their viewpoints on things, as well as people representing companies and spanning from drug discovery, drug development, drug manufacturing, biotech, medtech, so I come from medtech at the moment, and so on. And we we meet as a committee on a quarterly basis as a full committee, and we tend to have a very packed agenda over our 2 hours or so that we spend together. And we aim to try and get an external speaker each time we meet, bringing in that additional insight. And we've been really fortunate with some of the people we've been able to get to come along. Most recently, we had somebody from British Patient Capital, BPC, who talked about the companies they invest in and what they look for and how that works. And we've also been able to have attendees from Innovate UK in the past, which is really important for people in our sector because that's one of our main sources of funding. And I think one of the things I would take away is the access we get at the BIA. Some of the key players in the space is superb, as are the discussions we managed to have with them. Linking back to something George said, some of the other recent discussions we've had at the committee is thinking about banking solutions for early stage and kind of growth stage companies, obviously off the back of the Silicon Valley Bank fun, I think, probably set towards at the start of the year, and also lots of conversations about the current state of funding for us, because obviously most of our members are within the SME space are probably loss making. You know, we haven't got revenue yet, we're not generating revenue, and so finding additional sources of funding is always really helpful. Given the amount of some of the work that's been going on in respect of R&D credits, I'll come on to that in a moment, which seems to be ever evolving and growing, we've now actually established a separate subcommittee, and we're going to be working with subcommittees under our main committee, simply because the work is continuous. And thank you, I think, Maria, you are part of that committee, so thank you very much for joining us with that one. Personally, I've been really fortunate to be involved in a whole wide range of discussions and activities, such as speaking on a webinar following the then recent changes on R&D tax credits with regarding to overseas restrictions, and to talk about kind of the impact it has on our members, where they were looking to make changes to say you can claim R&D tax credit on work you do overseas. A lot of our companies outsource a lot of our work because that's the nature in our business model, and it's going to have a catastrophic effect. So as the BIA and through the Finance and Tax Advisory Committee, we campaigned hard on that and managed to carve out for companies who are doing it for reasons other than cost. Obviously, understanding with the tax position, we don't want to be simply doing things overseas because it's cheaper, but because that's where our patients are, or that's where the disease prevalence as part of that is, or there's regulatory requirements. And we were very fortunate, we managed to get a member or a senior person from HMRC to attend that webinar with us. Actually, for those who are interested, I think that's still on YouTube, as well as we've been able to provide insight and input into discussions with HMRC and Treasury and some of the other R&D tax changes, which George just mentioned. And I think the one that George mentioned was the significant cut in the R&D tax credit announced in the autumn statement, which would have had a really huge detrimental impact on our companies, both in terms of actual cash flow, but the ability to attract other investment in. And we were very proactive and engaged heavily with HMRC and Treasury on this, and to the point where, as you saw in George's slide, a letter actually came out to the BIA from the government on it, recognising the impact that change was going to have on our companies and people in this space. And what we've seen now is a subsequent carve-out that was announced in March, where for those companies where you spend at least 40% of your expenditure on R&D, you will not suffer that big cut in the R&D tax credit rate, which is huge. Although we are in a bit of an interesting position because those tax rules apply from the 1st of April, but the actual legislation that brings it in, we're still waiting for that to be published for consultation prior to enactment. So there's a bit of a fun time for finance people within biotechs at the moment, or this space, as we try and work out what tax rules will apply and when. And obviously, more generally, as George has mentioned, we input into a number of consultation responses made by the BIA, and we act as an advocate for our members. Something that we are looking to build on is how we grow the next generation of finance leaders, whether that's through the committee or as a separate project, and it's something I'm actually really passionate about. Because the move from being a financial controller or head of finance to the #1 finance role in a life science company is a big jump, and the individual needs to wear a vast number of hats, as we all do in these sorts of roles, and then they get to be very quickly exposed to fairly technical and complex matters. mostly due to the financing strategies and business models pursued by companies in this space. I think that's, for me, one of the really interesting things I like about my work is the vast things that get thrown at you that you have to think through and work through, as well as working with some really clever people within life sciences. I think it's that really great mix of kind of academic and business minds. So that was a little bit of a view of the work we've been doing at the Finance and Tax Advisory Committee, and hopefully you'll see some more stuff coming out from us over the summer as we get to see the consultation on the wording for the legislation. So thank you, Astrid.
Oh, thank you very much, Melissa. I think really well summarised there. You know, the work that the impact the work of a committee can have in terms of, you know, focusing on specific areas, bringing expertise together and using that knowledge to create a force for change. So it sounds like you have very effective meetings on a quarterly basis. So that's wonderful. Thank you so much. So Maddie and Sinead, you're from our version, our Health Sector Network panel community. I know you two were keen to talk about the issues that you're facing and that you'd like ACCA and BIA perhaps to work together on more. So I don't know who would like to go first. Sinead, would you like to go first and talk about
I was going to vote for Maddie.
that? Okay. Okay, Maddie, would you like
to go first? Did you want me
first?
to go first?
We'll go alphabetically.
I didn't hear. Did you say me go first?
Yes,
please, Maddie. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, that's fine. I'm going to cover an awful lot, really. Our issues are those that Melissa's been talking about just now. So I work under the banner of CFO for Growth, which is a portfolio as a CFO, a portfolio CFO to support businesses that don't yet need a full-time CFO. And I've been working in life sciences for nearly 30 years now, having joined a startup in the mid-90s, which was Alliance Pharma. And that introduced me to the world of SME pharma and the experience of taking companies through their growth journey with building financial models, funding, M&A, IPO, and investor relations, and so on. And since then, I've stayed in the sector, working across established brands, therapeutics, devices, diagnostics, and digital health. So I work with entrepreneurial CEOs and their management teams to support them through their phases of growth. And some of the issues, as I said, are ones that Melissa's been talking about. So whilst access to funding has always been an issue for SME, pharma and biotech, it's never been as critical as it is now. And unfortunately, many VCs have been burnt with unsuccessful investments and reluctant to fund something that's unproven or without traction. In fact, I have only one company in my portfolio that's well funded, the cash run in anticipation of the next funding round. And actually, the next funding round seems to be more of a strategic investment as opposed to a VC investment. COVID did provide access to funding such as the Future Fund and Innovate, and full advantage was taken there. In fact, I've been through the conversion fund, the conversion process with the Future Fund, which was painful, but valuable lessons were learned, and I'd be happy to share that experience to anybody that is about to do the same. I can only say good things about Innovate, and one of the factors that you can be sure of in life sciences is that everything changes. But I found Innovate to be really understanding, and to the extent that we've managed to secure deferment of repayments on the loan and are in negotiations to extend this further. And I found that approaching them with valid reasons for a delay and the revised plan has worked for the businesses I've been working with. Then there's two other points that I want to pick up on, really. The changes to the R&D tax credits, as Melissa's been talking about. The regime has hit us hard with the additional reporting and the reduced percentages. And we've been caught up in the changes that have been made, but we're really interested in the campaigning that's been going on and some of the inroads that have been made, and we're actively watching this space for the changes coming up. And then actually more recently, new issues have arisen, which we haven't discussed as a panel because it's really only very new. The pressures within the NHS have resulted in the support for a clinical trial being stopped because they don't have the capacity to support it. And that's months and months of work down the drain, really, because the trial hasn't reached its conclusion. And the only way it could progress is by being self-funded, but with a lack of access to funding, we just simply don't have it, and so the trial has to stop. And actually, this is one of the events that we put forward to Innovate to support the delay in our repayments. So that's my sort of summary of issues that we're facing. I'm sure none of them are new to anybody on this call, but I just wanted to outline those, and I'll hand over to Sinead and she could give you her view.
Thanks, Maddie. I'm probably going to repeat a lot of what Melissa and Maddie have talked about, but in my role in the Medicines Discovery Catapult, we have a very unique view on the sector. So we're Innovate funded, so that, and with was it the purpose of supporting SMEs to actually get to a point where they can prove their scientific hypothesis and then actually look to start making money move. So we're also in a position where we actually receive that funding, but we're trying to push that out into the SME part of the life sciences sector. So we have a vested interest in all of this. And actually, you know, looking at some of the publications that George showed, one of them that we are involved in, it's a statement of the Discovery Nation, which we do in conjunction with BIA on a regular basis, which really looks at this funding landscape. I think a couple of observations that we've had as an organisation is that funding is on a reduction at the moment with the interest rates and inflation, the way they're going. Venture capital money is just not flowing. Private equity money isn't flowing quite as much as it did. And that seems to be having disproportionate impact geographically. So you're seeing was funding in the north of the country, into Scotland and Wales particularly, starting to drop out, and that intense was a kind of concentration into the south is becoming more was a prevalent rather than was it what we're trying to do as a country, which is to spread that. So I think there's some issues there about that geographical funding. There's also some really interesting statistics coming out through some reporting that Bohurst and Bain did around the focus of funding on male founders as well. And again, female founders are disproportionately been impacted by the slowdown of funding. So actually we're seeing fewer female founded companies getting that level of investment. So I think there's something there, but as an industry and a sector looking to support our female founders coming out of academia and actually bringing those ideas to light, and particularly with a view to women's health, you will find that it's a lot of female founders who will have a very clear focus on women's health. So a bit of kind of let's even that up on the gender side. R&D tax credits, that just chucked the whole thing into chaos, and particularly I see quite a few of a BIA committee here, and a number of people across the sector work so hard to try and unravel that. But with R&D tax credits, I think it's indicative of the funding across the board, whether it's R&D tax credits, non-dilutive funding such as grants. It's the complexity of the system that small companies are being asked to engage in, when, to Melissa's point, they may have a single finance person, or actually may not even have a whole single finance person, as in Maddie's case, where they might have 0.1, 0.2 of a person who is trying to unravel numerous complex funding sources with very complex reporting, complex application processes. You know, if we think about our funding councils, they're absolutely phenomenal, and I have nothing but good things to say about them, but they absolutely have to take and bash the process, which if you're having to engage with JES or other pieces can be really quite complex, and you might end up in a position where you're having to go in as a service provider rather than a subcontractor or a partner, because the reporting is so complex, you're having to avoid it, which then therefore has IP issues down the line. So I think there's something there around the simplification of the funding process for SMEs. How can they act? How can we make sure that whilst we assure the due diligence is adhered to, that we can allow a simplified way in for our SMEs to get that non-diluted funding? And the other thing I would say is around, what we do is fast moving by its nature. It has to be fast moving. We're on the innovation side of life sciences. None of this is handled churn. Every single piece of this is what we're doing. We are on the cutting edge. which means that we have to tackle IP protection as well. So whilst we're also juggling how to get some funding, we're also trying to understand how can we actually afford to put the IP protection in place to ensure that we actually have an asset that we can utilize. And I think there's something there again around that IP process. How can we ensure that we can have all of these things streamlining in together and looking at that whole life cycle of IP protection, funding, etc., that we have to do to see if we can smooth that out. There is enough will, I believe, in our sector to work together collaboratively. There is so much push from our government. You know, the Mansion House speech this week was really positive, some really good messaging coming out there around trying to get access to pension funding. What I think is really important for us as a sector to do is ensure that as we release that funding, we do it in a managed and readily available way, that we're not putting administrative burden which takes away from the scientific spend, so that we can actually get the money to the labs and where it absolutely needs to be. So I think that they would be my kind of overall observations at the moment.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Sinead. And what struck me there was, as you say, you know, that it's all about working together as a community, because these are shared issues across the sector. And as we've heard from George, you know, the association has lobbied successfully, and that's been done on behalf of its members. As you say, it's all about, you know, reducing the admin burden, making sure the money gets to the labs. It's about reducing complexity around funding, IP protection. So it does sound as if it's very much, it's been demonstrated how effective it is bringing people together within this sector as a community to speak with one voice. And that's very much what we want to achieve through the talking series in terms of bringing members together around this topic. It's the first topic that the first talking series that we've run on this topic. It's still quite a small growth area for me. I haven't worked much in this part of the health sector, so I'm keen to grow and explore the sector, especially in terms of how we can work together as a community with BIA. So thank you all very much for a really useful overview there of the sector, the issues, the support that is available, and the community that is there to support finance professionals within the sector.